Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First, thanks for visiting my channel. I really appreciate you coming here. If you wouldn't mind, it really helps out getting my channel growing if you'd hit the like button before you leave. Thank you in advance for that. I appreciate it. Today, I wanted to make use of a stone that I've been sitting on for a long time. I actually bought a little bag of these 15 years ago. And they're kind of fancy saddle-shaped faceted stones. I think they're pink cubic zirconias. And I've been wanting to try to do something with them for a long time, and I've never really figured out what I wanted to do. So I drew up some sketches of some ideas I wanted to try. I thought we'd make a ring with one of them today. So let's get started on that. Here's the stone I was talking about. It's got kind of it's got facets that go in this direction on top, but it's cut in kind of a saddle shape this way and that way, and so and the facets on the bottom go the opposite direction. It's kind of pretty and sparkly, but it's an odd shape. I think it's probably designed for some sort of inlay situation or a cast ring where you can just plop it into a pre-made spot. But either way, I thought it might be fun to try to do something with it, and I'll show you some of the ideas I have. The primary thing is I'm going to be creating something like this for it to sit in, and then we'll put some prongs on it probably, but we need to mount it on some kind of a setting, and so I've drawn up some different ideas for that. This is my little design idea book. You can find these on the merch store if you're interested. I really like how they got this graph paper it's not really graph paper, but it's got dots where the corners of graph paper normally would be, so you have the same kind of effect, but you don't have all those lines interfering with your drawings and things. So I've gone over this a few times trying to figure out what I wanted to do with it. Just mounting one of those on an open-ended wide sheet band was an option, mirroring the shape of the kind of oval that it's going to look like from the top, I thought, in the band. Wire, just a wire band made out of 14 gauge wire or something. How it's going to sit on top of it. There's all sorts of issues you have to deal with this stone. So I think I'm kind of settling on something like this, probably, where I'm going to make some sheet. I'm going to solder, well, I'm going to make it into a tapered thing. You can see the tapers right here. So it'll be wide at the center, narrow at the ends. I'm going to solder some square wire from about here up to, a little bit longer than I think I need it after I make this round, so that it projects upwards off of the curve of the thing. So those are going to end up being our prongs, and also the part that's going to hold this little I don't know, little framework that I've created that kind of matches the curve of the stone. So I think the prongs will probably we'll kind of file them so they get narrower and pointier as they go, and then we'll just kind of solder that in there so they go over the top of it and hold it elevated. I'm thinking from the top, this thing is going to be elevated off of the band a little bit. I hope, at least. That's my plan. So I guess we'll see how it works. So let's make a band first. This is actually measured out for about a size 9. And I think I'm going to use, let's talk about materials. 14 gauge square for most of this kind of stuff, and these there, and then 18 gauge sterling sheet. This stuff right here, this kind of thick sheet. And I think that's about all we'll need for this one, probably. There may be, yeah, we'll see, but I think that's most of it. As always, I'll be using hard silver solder in sheet form, and I use a spray-on flux called My-T-Flux. Torch I use is a Silversmith torch. It used to be called the Smith Handy Heat, I think, if I remember right. So it's a good torch, acetylene air torch. Alright, so let's see. Get some sheet here. Got my little. I wrap this around the mandrel to get the size, so that's size 9 plus a little bit extra for file room. And we can kind of mark it out on this sheet here. It's nice when you have a brand new factory in like this. It's all perfectly straight. It'd be nice to have a bench shears. I think they're expensive though. I think as far as the width of this thing, it's got to be at least wide enough for that. So I'm thinking maybe we can always file it down a little, but we can't add much very easily, so let's go that route. Okay, so that is 12 millimeters. I've been using a lot more thick sheet than I had. I had to order some more. Been making some big, heavy, kind of bold designs lately. It's actually about 3 millimeters in from either end, the taper. Do the same thing on this side. I'm just measuring how far in that this taper is going to come down to. It's going to go out to the edge out here and then kind of get narrower as it comes to the bottom of the ring. Trouble with my words today, apparently. Okay, now we need to find the center of this. Let's see when I scribe these lines. Paper that. That'll help me to know where to lay down those pieces of square wire that I'm going to use as the prongs of this thing. So I think if we're going to do this, let's cut this out. I'm going to leave it as a rectangle and then make it into a band. I'm not going to cut off these edges like I normally would if I was making a wide kind of band like this. I'll leave them on there in order for me to be able to line up the square wire that I'm going to solder to that outside. So I think that'll help us in the long run. So let's cut this out. Never made one quite like this, so I'm kind of playing it by ear a little bit. Oh, before we go any further, I wanted to thank some people. I specifically wanted to thank my YouTube subscribers. We're approaching 4,000 people, and that's amazing. I can't believe how much it's grown over the past year or so. Thank you so much for your support, your comments, the nice contributions of coffees that you guys have been giving me. You know, the people who've signed up for my Patreon. The people who've bought my merch, I really appreciate all that stuff. That all helps financially. So if you wanted to do any of that stuff, you know, make sure to visit the video description down below the video. There's links to all that kind of you know, supporting the channel kind of stuff down there. So, but specifically, I wanted to also thank my patrons over on Patreon. They're paying for my premium content, and I appreciate their support. I love sharing ideas with them over there. We have a great Discord server over there where we can you know, help each other find solutions to problems, get praise or criticism of our work, or you know, what have you. So it means a lot to me that you find my content valuable enough that you go and pay for premium content too. So thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and file these ends. One side should be pretty factory straight, but I may have caused a little projection when I cut it in the other direction on the end here. I'm going to file that down. Okay, so let me find some 14 gauge. I'm going to have it soldered on here, but I'm going to have it merge back into the band. So I'm cutting pieces about that long. I don't know how high I'm going to have to lift these up, so I'm going to cut them a little bit longer than I probably will need, but I can always cut them off later. My philosophy is generally always cut an extra one of anything you're making. Sometimes that saves you having to remeasure, and because then you have an extra one you can use as a template, or you can just replace one of the ones that you messed up if you messed it up. Okay, so let's file the ends of these flat. So basically they're going to be going 2 from that side, 2 from this side. And what I meant earlier when I said I could bend some of it up, I could, like, about right here, have it bend sharply up and then solder them on at this point, then make it round, or try to, but it's going to be super hard to bend in these spots where the square wire is attached to the sheet here, much harder than the areas where there's no square wire, so it's going to be a little bit wonky and hard to deal with. So let's, first of all, we can decide how far down we want those things to disappear. I don't want them to go too far down because it'll make the band uncomfortable. That right there, maybe. See how far from the end that is. And we'll just measure all 4 of them that way. It's 11 millimeters. I think what I'll do then is after they're attached, I'll just kind of taper them back into the band so they just kind of merge. I really appreciate all the people who've been buying me coffees lately. That really adds up and helps out financially a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's make this. Let's turn this into a band. So find my ring band right there in front of me. I'll make sure to put my little scratch marks on the outside. I usually make it into a U shape like this if I'm making this sort of a thing. And then I bend these ends towards each other nicely, kind of in a straight way. Then we'll get a nice clean solder joint, hopefully. Quite a bit of solder on the pad from yesterday, so file off a little excess on the inside. Can't really see those marks very well where I was going to start. I can see these ones though. I'm just really trying to make it so I can see these little scratches I made, so I can line up the square wire when I do put it on here. It needs to kind of, if I want this to be elevated a little bit, which I do, it needs to start separating. Probably, this is the center right there. Just about even. I think about right here. And that is from the center point. About 5 millimeters. That's about where it should separate the wire when it comes off. Didn't we decide it was 11 millimeters from the bottom? Can't really see the mark I made, so kind of have to estimate. That's reasonably close. This is where I'm going to start that wire. The filed side here. And what I can do is probably just curve it right around the 9 where I was sizing this ring at, which is pretty, it was actually coming out pretty close. The spot where it separates is right about there. So theoretically, if I straighten this one back out, I should be able to mark them all that way so I know just where to bend them a little bit. Now the other end we got to make it match the curve of that a little bit. Right around a 9-ish. I'm going to do a little bit of manually here to get it started. Should be able to go just kind of like that. So really, individually, we're going to be soldering these on just like this, where they separate from the band at about the same place, but they taper inwards a little bit. So the easiest way to probably do that would be to sweat a little bit of solder on the inside of this here, and then we'll just heat this thing up and put it where it goes. reason I'm doing it this way is to kind of prevent some excess mess of solder from flowing off to the side. That would be more likely to happen if I was leaning solder against it or something, instead of putting it where it should go before we place it. Just got to do a little bit of kind of precise placement here. Sometimes you can use the flux to kind of stick it in place. Sometimes you can nudge things a little bit. Let's cool this off and see how it looks. So basically, my thought process anyway, is that this thing will go in between here, kind of raised up, and then I'll carve these ones into like pointed prongs that kind of curve over the top there. So, but I've got to get that elevated and in place. And I also wanted to show you how I made this little thing. If you look at this, this is basically a circle that's been bent. And so in order to create a bent circle like that, you can figure it out by looking at the distance from here to here as the diameter, and then figure for the circumference, and then you can do a piece of square wire into a circle like that. Turns out on my veil making pliers here, when you add in the width of the square wire, it comes pretty close to being the right distance. So what I did was I just basically made jump ring jump rings with the square wire around the bigger part of this bail making pliers. You can see that's pretty close. So when I snip one off of here then, solder this guy closed. Got it cleaned up a little bit. Might need to get it started. This is pretty thick when you're bending something this small. You need to kind of get the bend started yourself by manually curving it a little bit. Then I generally end up back on the bail making pliers again. You can use multiple pairs of pliers at the same time here. Grabbing this and pulling it down. It doesn't really take too long to start to get it into the shape here. So this one I made a little bit smaller, it looks like. So if I was going to use this one, I probably would have to do a little dremeling, a little more shaping to get it just exactly where it fits in there. I had this one pretty good, I think. So probably do a little bit of dremeling once I have that in place, but I do want to get it soldered in, so make sure that I'm smooth on the top here. Okay, let's see if we can figure out how to get this guy to sit in. So I'm going to mark where those all meet so I can file some notches on the inside. That is, if I can locate my marker. Where's my marker? I want it to sit up high enough to where some light gets to it. So I want it to be straight. Alright, I'm going to file a little notch on the inside of each of those, see how that works. Push it into the pad. Then I'm going to pick solder those. Hopefully nothing will move on me. Super handy when you gotta stick something into the pad if you want it to kind of stay in place. nicely. Throw a little bit more on this one. All right. Sitting kind of upright, pretty symmetrically. Not too shabby. Okay, I'm gonna let that pickle, and then I'll be removing some of that stuff, and we'll be carving the prongs into shorter, pointier tips. Make sure that all of these have good solder joints there after it pickles for a while. And then we'll check back on it. Okay, so I got it pretty much polished up. Big question is, will I be able to get this in here and fit it nicely? So I think to start with, I'll thin these out a little bit. It's not perfect, but I think I'm going to clean it up with the Dremel a little bit on the prongs, shorten them a bit, and then I think it'll be done. So it does get a lot of light. I like it. It's kind of cool. So I'll take some better pictures at the end, and then we'll be done. Right, that was the fancy saddle-shaped stone ring. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. That helps YouTube's algorithm find my channel and promote it. Leave some comments. I love discussions about things that you see here, or ideas you have, or suggestions for videos. Those kinds of things are great. And don't forget to check out the video description for the various relevant links, like if you just wanted to buy me a coffee, or maybe sign up for my Patreon, which would be great. But either way, check out some videos, subscribe to the channel, and come back and watch a few more. So thanks for watching. Happy silversmithing. Take care.